If your ESX hosts are running version 5, you have the opportunity with your Xangati deployment to take advantage of a brand new feature that VMware has released for the distributed virtual switch. Your Xangati appliance depends on a number of information sources to be fully functional. One of them is vCenter and includes the CPU, memory, and data store statistics. The network information, however, can come from a variety of different sources. In the initial install video, we discussed how to use flow summarizers to get this information by deploying a small virtual machine on each host in your network. Another way that we can accomplish this goal is to use the new distributed switch functionality present in ESXi. In order to enable this, there's two parts of the configuration, one in Xangati and another inside vCenter. Let's take a look at vCenter first. In vCenter, if you take your inventory settings and go to the networking, you'll be able to find your distributed virtual switch or switches, as the case may be. If you haven't worked with ESXi yet, if you go to create a new distributed virtual switch, you'll notice that in order to get Netflow functionality, it will need to be a version 5 distributed switch. And the configuration is very simple, of course, and you can follow along with the prompts to go ahead and make this work. Once you're in your inventory settings for networking, you'll notice all of your distributed virtual switches are listed. If you have legacy distributed virtual switches created under previous versions and you choose Edit Settings, you may not have the Netflow settings, and you'll need to migrate to a version 5 distributed switch. A version 5 distributed switch, when you choose the Edit Settings, has a number of additional tabs to it, one of them being the Netflow tab. Enabling Netflow on a distributed switch is a very simple process. First of all, you go to the Netflow tab and enable Netflow on a global basis. And you do this by specifying the address of your Xangati dashboard as the collector. So I'll enter in the address of mine and use port 2058 as a default. The next thing you'll need to specify is an address for this Netflow traffic to originate from. Note that this address does not have to be routable or even real inside your network. What it does do is serves to uniquely identify this flow source to the Xangati appliance. So I'm going to choose a private address that is not anywhere in my network. To identify this flow. I'm going to need to remember this address because it also needs to be entered in the Xangati appliance. The default parameters for advanced settings are acceptable, and you'll go ahead and press OK. The next thing that we need to do is we need to actually enable the Netflow functionality on a port group or on many port groups. Once it's enabled globally, select your port group and choose Edit Settings. You will notice there's a monitoring tab, and under that, the Netflow status defaults to disabled. To use Netflow, simply set it to enabled. At this point, any virtual machine that is inside of this port group will now generate Netflow records toward the Xangati appliance. You will need to repeat this process of enabling each port group for any other port groups that may be a part of this distributed switch. With that done, that concludes the configuration inside the vSphere client, and everything else is done in the Xangati. Inside the Xangati appliance, you will go to the Setup menu and choose Infrastructure Data Feeds. To add a distributed virtual switch, simply choose the Add button, and for feed source, choose Router. The address that you specify here will be the address for the VDS that you input into the vSphere client. So I will go ahead and put in mine, and you put in yours. We'll be receiving the flows on our management interface on port 2058 because that's what we configured inside of the vSphere client. It's a Netflow feed, and we can ignore the rest of the messages. At this point, we can go ahead and press the Finish button, and that will complete the Xangati setup. At this point, you've now configured a distributed virtual switch to send Netflow to Xangati, and you've set the Xangati up to receive those flows. As always, once the modification is complete, we can use the Xangati user interface to check on the status of our new flow source. Under the Appliance tab, Flow Status, you will notice that we now have a new entry for our distributed virtual switch. And, like with our other flow sources, we can expect that as Discovery restarts, we'll see flow packets and virtual bitrate confirming that our data source is now in place.